You're listening to WXOJLP FM, Northampton Valley Free Radio. And coming up next is the Radical Mental Health Show. Why are so many Americans taking psychiatric medication? Did you know that the U.S. is one of only 2 countries in the world where drug companies advertise directly to consumers? Join distinguished speakers from England, Dr. Phil Thomas, psychiatrist with 20 years' experience, and Rufus May, clinical psychologist and schizophrenia survivor, for a talk and community discussion, Drugging Our Distress, a broader look at medication and mental illness. Monday, November 13th, 7:30 p.m., Hooker Auditorium, Mount Holyoke College. Free and open to the public. Wheelchair and public transit accessible. Call with interpreter or other access needs. For more info, call Freedom Center 413-582-9948 or Mount Holyoke College Department of Psychology and Education 413-538-2338 www.freedom-center.org.
Hello everyone, this is Bonfire Madigan. We're not crazy, the system is. Tune into the Radical Mental Health Show hosted by the Freedom Center, Wednesday nights, 6 to 7 p.m. on Valley Free Radio, WXOJ 103.3 FM.
And this is Will Hall with the Radical Mental Health Show on Valley Free Radio. And today we have a show that is going to be having a guest who's a healer from New York. She's calling in, and we're going to be talking about spirituality and madness, shamanism, journeying different realms of reality, and what the experiences of mania and madness and psychosis mean from that kind of alternative healing perspective. So it's going to be a really interesting show. And let me get started by saying, folks probably heard the PSA. We have a big event coming up on the 13th of November. Phil Thomas and Rufus May are going to be here. They're leaders in the critical psychiatry, the survivor movement, the activist challenge to mental health in England. So they're coming actually here for a big conference in Toronto, and we were able to work with Mount Holyoke College to get them to take a stop in South Hadley for a show, lecture and discussion, Drugging Our Distress, a broader look at medication and mental illness. So that's November 13th. We're really looking forward to that lecture. So check that out. It's on our website. And the Radical Mental Health Show is sponsored by the Freedom Center. You can find out more about the Freedom Center at our website, which is freedom-center.org. And we have a number of services and programs, activism, education, advocacy that we do. We have a free yoga class on Mondays, a free acupuncture clinic, a free support group on Thursdays. And we also do public events like the event that's coming up at Mount Holyoke. We do legal advocacy dealing with human rights abuses. Actually, we've been working quite a bit with a number of problems that people have had at Cooley Dickinson Hospital. And I think you'll be hearing more about that pretty soon. And so, yeah, there's a lot more to say about the Freedom Center, but I want to get right to our guest, who's we've had a number of technical problems today trying to get this rolling. So we're going to see how it goes. Julie's been very patient. My guest today is Julie Spooner. Julie is a licensed psychologist in private practice in New York City, and she's taught at several college campuses. Julie is also going to be soon opening a holistic healing center in Brooklyn. And we're going to be talking about spirituality, healing, shamanism, journeying, and alternative realities. So it's really a great honor to welcome Julie Spooner to the show. Julie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Hi there. Wow, I'm really glad to have you today. I heard Julie give a fantastic workshop at the Icarus Project Skillshare about a month ago in New York City about urban shamanism and what that means and what spirituality and healing all have to do from a perspective of visioning. And I just was really excited. I thought it was a really fascinating workshop. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I can just start out by asking you, how did you get involved with this healing work? How did you get started in all this?
Well, I've been a psychologist for almost 20 years, but more recently I just developed this idea. I mean, I've always had an alternative approach. I've always been more interested in herbs and meditation and things as opposed to medication. So that's always been my bent, and I always wanted to open a healing center. And so during the process of recruiting healers for the healing center, I figured I'd have an acupuncturist, an herbalist, things like that, homeopath, osteopath. But during my search, I kept encountering people who said, oh, I do past life regression, I do soul retrievals, I do readings, I do divination. And so I guess I could kind of say it came to me. I was just sort of outreaching into the community, and for some reason that's what started to flow in my direction. And at first I was kind of like, wait a minute, this is a little off the chart. I need, acupuncture, herbs. But it was so prevalent that I just decided to go with it. And I received some of the treatments and just started to learn about it, and I was immediately hooked.
And you're actually starting your own healing center. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm currently in contract on a space out in Brooklyn. So I'm hoping to open sometime in November. And there's going to be a yoga center predominantly, but there will also be other classes in maybe martial arts, in dance, probably African dance, and there's someone who's going to teach Qigong. And then on the weekends, it's going to be a cultural center, and there will be spoken word, dance, theater, all kinds of arts programming and films, radical films. So it'll be kind of a healing/cultural center out in Brooklyn.
Yeah, Julie is part of a healing circle that happens every month, I guess it is. And I went to one of those, and I thought it was really great. I really appreciated that it was accessible to people like me with low income. And so, yeah, it's just really great to have you on the show. And I just wanted you to get a chance to tell people, what is this thing called shamanism or journeying, and how might it relate to the experiences that people have that get labeled madness or mania or psychosis?
Right. Well, what I'm going to introduce folks to, and people in this particular listening audience may not be familiar with this process, I'm going to try to really spell it out as clearly as possible so people can understand, just what we're looking at. So I practice something that I call journeying. That's sort of the modern word that's used for it. And the longer tradition is shamanism. And basically, if you think about things like clairvoyance and expanded awareness, expanded consciousness, things like that, that's all within the realm of journeying and shamanism. And for me, shamanism, I distinguish that shaman are initiated in a very particular way according to a particular spiritual and cultural tradition. So I kind of honor that hasn't been my path of being initiated in a formal way. So currently I don't consider myself to be a shaman, but what shamans do is basically they develop what we call, I guess, clairvoyant abilities and expanded awareness. And they are able to perceive other dimensions. So even in the West, where we don't generally talk so much about these things, we usually, for the most part, live within the three dimensions. Science, of course, is aware, especially with quantum physics. You're hearing a lot of talk about the fourth, fifth dimension and beyond, but we hear about it as a scientific thing that's out there, but we rarely really have an understanding of how people can actually go into these realms. And so that's what folks who are kind of in urban settings who are starting to do this practice, we call it journeying. And people who are clairvoyant, for instance, they kind of journey naturally. So you might know people who can do readings. They can have premonitions. They can maybe speak with ancestors. They can maybe see your aura. All these kinds of abilities, connecting to past lives, all of these abilities clairvoyant people have, sometimes naturally. But through journeying, you can anyone actually can learn how to expand our consciousness, how to cross into these other dimensions. So that's basically the process of journeying allows you to really develop your clairvoyant ability, so to speak. So maybe I'll just sort of talk about what, a little more of what you see in these other dimensions. So I kind of mentioned quickly that someone who's clairvoyant, they would look at a person or a plant or an animal, and they would see what we see in the three dimensions, but then they would also see the energy field. I guess in the West we'll talk about an energy field that surrounds the plant or the person. And so you might see different colors, right? Different things emanating and swirling, and you might even actually see objects embedded in a person's energy field, which I'll get into a little bit later. And so those are things that are always there, but not all of us can see them. And a clairvoyant person might actually see someone who has died, right? That the spirit of that person can actually exists and may be hovering around, and a clairvoyant person may see that ancestor. And then there are things that we call spirit guides, and those are kind of the spirit beings that tend to surround people. So we all actually have different spirit guides in human form, or maybe in animal form. It could even be insects. I mean, it could be any form really that may walk with you, and you may not see them or perceive them directly, but everyone is surrounded by this spiritual community, you could say. So again, someone who is journeying or someone who is clairvoyant, I have a couple of friends. Like I usually will journey in ritual, so I do something using drumming music and to put myself in a mild, not even really a trance, it's just a minor shift of consciousness to see this. But I have friends who just do this naturally. So if someone walks into the room, they can say, wow, that person walks with many guides. They can just look at them and actually see these beings all around them. And then the other thing about this expanded consciousness and journeying is that you can travel across time. So I think, again, in quantum physics, you're starting to hear more about how time is not linear. So now, then, and what will be is really more a question of where you are than when. Well, all right, maybe that's going to sound complicated, but the main idea is that basically the past and the future are all existing now, and you can journey to them. So people who can tell things that have not yet happened, it's because their spirit, their perception is taking them into a possible future. That can be changed. They'll see something based on the thrust of the energy, your thoughts, your drives, everything that surrounds you. They can tell you where you're likely to head, but you can shift that. But the possible futures and all past events can all be accessed. So does that make sense so far? Do you have any questions so far?
Well, I imagine it's really new to a lot of people, but what kinds of things happen when you... It's one of those things like for me, I'm really relating to it because this definitely resonates with a lot of my own experience. But I think a lot of it, just as a question of whether you've sort of like you kind of know it because you've been there kind of thing,
right.
But what kinds of help are you able to provide to people, or what is it that happens when you do these journeying experiences?
Well, I guess as a therapist, the idea is that through my journeying, what I experienced was I realized that people who they say are psychotic, are schizophrenic, for example, or perhaps manic, sometimes people just have an expanded kind of consciousness, and they don't understand what's going on. so just having this awareness of what are these other dimensions like? What's it like to access them? What are some of the pitfalls that can make it uncomfortable to access them? Just having an understanding of that helps a person to understand the different mental states that we describe as mental illness.
So someone might be going through, they might be overwhelmed by the different kinds of things that they're perceiving energetically,
exactly.
And then you're saying that there's actual reality to that from a spiritual journeying or shamanic
and
perspective.
I was actually going to really detail it, because I know that's the focus of this program, so I really wanted to lay out very clearly what can happen. I mean, I'll start with this woman that I was working with who came in identifying as schizophrenic, who had been on antipsychotic medications for 8 years, and would have visions of things, would hear things, and was very frightened by all of this, and felt like, and she was like, okay, I have this, I'm schizophrenic, and basically I try to medicate it. And then through just having her kind of relax in session, do a little bit of meditation, she all of a sudden began to speak about this very differently. All of a sudden she said, I see auras. And she said a woman who died in her community, she was able to, the woman's spirit came to her and told her how she was murdered, and she just thought she was crazy. She was just very frightened by this. And the other thing she mentioned was, through putting her hand on this person's heart, she was able to see that woman's memories. She just started reciting what she was seeing, and the woman was shocked, and she said, those are my memories. Because that's my life, So suddenly the hearing voices and the standard things you hear, which we would label schizophrenia, suddenly, I'm thinking, wait a minute, this sounds like clairvoyance. This sounds like you may have abilities to see things that people say that they can see. So, through a process of sort of gently exploring what exactly are her perceptions and how can she learn, and the fact that I was journeying and seeing similar things. I could see spirits of people who died. I actually right now don't see auras, but I can see objects embedded in somebody. I was seeing similar things to her, and I knew of other people with those abilities. So I just, little by little, we explored what she could see. I introduced her to the concept of journeying, and she learned how to kind of, instead of just always be open, she learned to develop a space to open and close. You could say a ritual where she would open consciously. And another important thing is the question of kind of clearing the space around you, because unfortunately, there are, just as there's disharmony and imbalance here, there is disharmony and imbalance in other dimensions as well. And so if you open yourself up and you're frightened and you're, in a bad state, you're likely to draw energies from other realms that are uncomfortable. And then you'll be even more likely to say, there's something wrong with me, So she learned to clear the space through sage, through different cleansing techniques, so that she would be in a higher, in a clearer, safer space. So then the energies she was drawing were not so frightening. But, the bulk of the work was getting her to simply see that these realms exist. There have been shamans, witch doctors, so to speak, priests and priestesses with these visions for thousands of years. And so she doesn't have to assume that just because she can see things that others can't see, she needs to be shut down, that there's something wrong,
So the challenge...
And I'm happy to say that it's been over a year now that she's been off the medication. And she's now learning, developing her abilities as a healer.
That's fantastic. So a lot of it is recognizing what's going on, and then realizing for a lot of people it's just a question of the kind of like the control, or the fact that someone's journeying all the time and they don't know what to do with it. They can't turn it off. They don't have the sort of empowerment around the experience. It's kind of the experience is kind of controlling them. Exactly.
And just, growing up in a culture where, if you see someone who has died, you know, it's like, I mean, sure, I guess it's a lot of people after death of a family member, they might have a dream, you know, that's acceptable. But to be awake and see that person who has died, it's just, there's no acceptance of that. So just being in a context where people can say, no, you know, that doesn't have to be an imbalance that needs to be shut down. Just giving people room to see much more than we usually consider normal, you know. And also as far as mania, you know, it seems to me like a lot of times when you connect to these energies, when you open yourself up, you definitely feel this heightened kind of, this heightened energy, and things kind of can speed up, and you feel this excitement, sometimes this elation, because it's a very powerful energy, actually, a very potentially healing energy. And so a lot of people who have this kinds of anxiety, certain kinds of anxieties, and particularly the euphoric kind of mania, I'm sure that a lot of the time it could be that they are connecting to these energies and they're not aware of what's happening. So they're sped up, they're euphoric, and in this culture, you're just bouncing off the walls. What's wrong with you? You know, there's no understanding of what are you seeing, what are you connecting to, you know, and sort of in that case, well, in both cases, the key is grounding, because you kind of want to get a handle on when you're taking off. So it's very important in all cases. And actually, maybe I should share for the listeners, because there may be people who feel a little kind of a loose connection. And so...
including the host sometimes, yeah. Actually.
Oh, hello?
Including myself sometimes, actually.
Oh, yeah,
sure.
Sure. And I'm sure, you know, most people probably feel it at moments, you know, but some really can just go off for days where they're not even sleeping, and it's very scary.
Oh, grounding is a real theme that comes through in a lot of the work that I've done just on myself and other people at the Freedom Center. I mean, just what are techniques that we can use to really feel more grounded?
Oh, good. So you deal with that in the organization a lot, and probably on the show. But I can kick out a couple of quick things that you probably know a lot of methods yourself. But one thing I often suggest is a simple visualization where you just go from the crown of your head and visualize a cord or a beam of energy traveling through the center of your body, down into the center of the earth. And you want to do it very gradually and mindfully, going from the crown, going slowly through all the different parts of your body, you know, and gradually through the earth and leading you to the core. And by you know, having that thought and that intention, you can actually connect to the earth's core, and that can help pull you down. And the other thing is actually eating things that grow in the earth. Carrots, beets, you know, potatoes, nice, heavy, solid foods is very good, as opposed to salads or, you know, something that's more airy, just to bring you down, you know. And another excellent one is connecting with the energy of a tree, because they have these intense, long roots into the earth. They're very grounded. So ideally, you could actually hug or lean against the tree and just focus your thoughts into the trunk of the tree and down into the earth, and that can really help. But otherwise, you could also just have a tree in view and look at the tree and mentally connect to its downward energy. So, and there are a lot of herbs you can use, so there are many methods. So what kinds of things at the Freedom Center do you know any techniques that you've used?
Well, we've gotten a lot of success with both our acupuncture clinic and with our yoga class. That's one of the things that people just rely on that as, you know, a cornerstone for a lot of us. You know, being able to come once a week to both of those has been fantastic. And, you know, personally, getting out into nature has been really important for me. Would you say that that's an important part of the work that you do?
And also actually rocks, not like the crystal or clear rocks, but any opaque, like a rock you can't see through, to just hold them in your hands or put them in your pockets. They're also very good. But actually, you mentioned yoga, and I do want to caution people about the Kundalini yoga, that where the breathing exercises where you're doing these rigorous motions and getting your breath going. That's to kind of open up the chi. So if you're prone to taking off pretty easily, that's actually to help people take off, expand their consciousness. So if you tend to be that way, you might be mindful that it might definitely send you out, and just make sure that you know how to ground if it ever gets uncomfortable, and you just stop and put your head between your knees and breathe, So that's something that people should be aware of.
And I think also that meditation can have that effect for some people. If you can start to get really ungrounded if you meditate a lot. Julie, I'm really interested in what you were saying about the journeying. Can you tell us more about what it is that you do and how it works, and how you're able to use the journeying to connect with these kinds of things that you notice in people and are able to work with healing with them?
Yes, well, when you journey, you basically, you connect with the different guides that I mentioned that can come in many forms, either human or in animal form. So you're connecting with different guides, and you're getting, first of all, a lot of love. That's what amazed me. I mean, there are beings with incredible love that just follow us around and guide us and are attempting to help us, So you get incredible love when you connect to these beings, and incredible wisdom, because, of course, their view from other dimensions, being able to see past and future, they have incredible wisdom, But then also, I have actually done healing work with different guides, so that I mentioned earlier that when you journey, you can actually see objects that are embedded in someone's energy field. So, for instance, if someone is very depressed and very sad, and they're just constantly churning on this sad energy, it may, and it's always sort of, they're constricting their breathing in their heart. Over time, someone who's clairvoyant might actually be able to see that over time they have manifested a dark cloud, say, around their heart. It'll manifest in some sort of symbolic form energetically. So when you journey and you can see something like that, you can actually remove it, And that's what a lot of the forms of energy healing are about. Reiki and different forms of energy healing actually remove those energies and rebalance all of the different energy centers or chakras that are in the body. So, I mean, that's a whole other show, the kinds of healing you can do. It's quite vast. And also, let's see, what's a good specific one? Actually, something I didn't mention in that workshop you heard, I've learned since, because I work with this woman who does shiatsu and craniosacral, but she also is clairvoyant, and she actually, when she's doing the body work, she actually has me journey into my body. So I usually will do an extraction, which is removing, if I'll see a dark cloud, I can remove that and just place it into water or place it into a candle flame. But for her, instead of just removing the cloud, she can actually have you journey into your heart, go inside and see what is there, what symbolic form does your heart take, and relate. Usually there's a being in the different parts of your body that you can actually dialogue with. I have to say this to people who are hearing all this for the first time, it's so surreal. It's going to sound so off the charts, but believe me, it's going to become commonplace pretty soon.
Yeah, say something, Julie. Say something.
So, for instance, I had a lot of stress and forward motion kind of in my shoulder. I tend to have this tightness in my right shoulder. And when I journeyed into my shoulder with her, I actually saw a middle-aged man, sitting in front of a desk, this antique-looking desk. And I was actually able to dialogue with him, that he was furious with me for neglecting his financial aspects and, sort of organizing more bureaucratic aspects of my life. And she said, the pain in my shoulder is simply coming from the fact that I'm ignoring this part of myself, which has manifested into this man. And to my surprise, visiting him, in her sessions as well as I would do it on my own, I mean, simply dialoguing with him, and he would literally give me instructions of things to do. He's just like, sit in front of your desk and contemplate your financial situation a bit each morning and do one task. I mean, we literally can dialogue. And when I honor his requests, I have no pain in my shoulder. It's really, this is new to me, and it's actually really shocking to me.
Well, I think it speaks to something that you said before. I think that a lot of this is just learning it. I mean, it's about trying it and experiencing it for yourself. There's not going to be any test or proof. There's going to be the experience of doing it. And
Yes.
I think that's I think the thing to encourage people. And I also, you mentioned something about it becoming commonplace. And I know that you talked about this a little bit in the workshop that I was at. Can you say a little bit about, why is it that spiritual healing and shamanism is becoming so much more prevalent, and how that might be related to the kind of times that we're in? Because we're moving into, and we're in a very serious crisis on a lot of different levels. And I know people have thought about that who listen to Valley Free Radio, certainly, because we talk about it a lot.
Right. Well, again, it's of course it's going to emanate from your people's belief system and experiences. So I guess people who tend to see things more in material, political terms will talk about, world events and where things are headed in a more relationship level. But then people who look astrologically and in terms of other spiritual trends, there's a lot of talk about, there's actually talk that we are moving into the fourth dimension, that we are in three dimensions. We're used to perceiving the concrete, and then, I've talked about what exists in the fourth dimension, other things that we can see, auras, ancestors. But there's talk about the fact that the whole planet is shifting towards the fourth dimension, so that it won't be just certain people who can see it, but that's where we will all exist. So once you really start to delve into these beliefs, you kind of begin to perceive all of world events in that context of the energetic shifts and our interactions with these guides and ancestors. The things that we see on a world scale in the three-dimensional relationships is actually only one small piece, but guides, ancestors, there are forces from way beyond Earth that are impacting all of these events. So once you kind of open your consciousness to all that, it's like it's a whole different way of seeing why things are happening. So I guess the simplest way to say it is that sort of like energetically we're passing into a sphere where there's a greater openness. And so, as you start to research and delve into this, you can see, oh my God, there's drumming circles in New York. I know of 3 shamanic drumming circles where people go and there's drumming and people just journey. There's tons of books on it. There's, like when I first found out about soul retrieval recently, I had never even heard of soul retrieval, but now I know there are dozens and dozens of people in New York who do soul retrieval. So it's more common than many people think, and it's growing.
So do you think that this shift, this energetic shift that you're talking about, do you have a positive and hopeful attitude towards it? Because I know that there are certainly, I get a little frightened when I hear, Christians and fundamentalists talking about the end of the world and apocalypse and the book of Revelations and all this kind of stuff. But what you're talking about sounds very different than that.
Yes. Well, I have very interesting news from the spiritual circles I run in, and I've seen this just all over the place. It's going to get worse, and then it's going to get wonderful. So the reason why things kind of seem bad, because it is going to first get worse, and there's going to be a lot of upheaval and a lot of loss of life, and the earth is going to have to pass through this cleansing, so to speak, which unfortunately, just like other birthing processes, just think of a woman giving birth. Think of how painful that is, you know? Incredible pain, right, to bring a new life. So similarly, sometimes we have to. Sometimes we shed blood, and sometimes there's a lot of pain before there's beauty. And so, but what I keep hearing is that after we get through that process, we will have reached another level, and it's beautiful.
Well, it sounds.
And that's the other thing about traveling in time. Many people who have looked ahead say we have already won, and the different guides I connect to, who see the whole picture, they say we've already won, and they just see how beautiful it is, and they're already so excited.
Well, it sounds very similar to the approach that a lot of us take to the experience of madness and breakdown, that becoming psychotic or going into that craziness is often like a birth experience. You go through a painful and sometimes destructive process that has a renewal to it and can actually be something that's positive. Julie, this has been a really wonderful opportunity talking with you, and we don't have very much time, but could you just leave us with some, your thoughts about what kind of advice or suggestions you might give to people who are very interested in this connection between madness, mental health, and journeying, shamanism, seeing what they're going through as a spiritual kind of process?
That's a great question. Well, gosh, I'm actually writing a book about it. I've got 100 pages, so hopefully in a year that will be out. But I actually don't know a lot that crosses the divide between the shamanism and mental health, but I can kick out a couple of titles of things that talk about shamanism, and when you understand that, it's not so difficult to connect your experience, you know?
Yeah.
So one that I would suggest is called Shamanic Journeying, A Beginner's Guide. Shamanic Journeying, A Beginner's Guide. And the author is Sandra Ingerman, Ingerman. And that's just a nice basic, it lays out a little more of the basics that I said. I never got to kind of the three realms, but the spirit guide, she explains all of that. And another one that I love is called Of Water and the Spirit. Of Water and the Spirit, and it's by Malidoma, Malidoma, Some, Some. So M and the last name Some. So those are, and actually one more quickly is called Shaman Healer Sage. Shaman Healer Sage, and that's by Alberto Villoldo, Villoldo. So those are some good books that give you a sense of what this is all about, the different realms, and then you can kind of see. And I should say that, you know, I haven't investigated enough people deemed psychotic, so to speak, to say that every one of them is journeying and needs to be. I think it's quite possible, but there are likely to sometimes be other dynamics at play. But I think it's worth assuming that that's a possibility and always approaching someone to suss that out first, you know?
Absolutely. Well, Julie, it's been really wonderful having you here. Thank you so much.
Actually, I never gave my number.
Yeah, please give us your contact information as well. Yeah.
I guess most people who are listening are in Boston, but you're still welcome to call. It's 212-420-7333. 212-420-7333.
And do you want to give, we'll also put this information on our website, but do you want to give your email address as well?
Oh, yeah. People can reach me at J. Spooner, S-P as in peace, O-O-N-E-R, Spooner, at AYA.YALE, Yale.edu.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay. Thank you, Will.
You've been listening to Julie Spooner. She's a licensed psychologist and healer who does shamanism and shamanic journeying. We've been talking about the relationship of that spiritual perspective to madness, mental health, mental illness, psychosis. And we will be back next week. You've been listening to the Radical Mental Health Show on Valley Free Radio, and this is WXOJ-LP 103.3 FM. Why are so many Americans taking psychiatric medication? Did you know that the U.S. is one of only 2 countries in the world where drug companies advertise directly to consumers? Join distinguished speakers from England, Dr. Phil Thomas, psychiatrist with 20 years experience, and Rufus May, clinical psychologist and schizophrenia survivor, for a talk and community discussion, Drugging Our Distress, a broader look at medication and mental illness. Monday, November 13th, 7:30 p.m., Hooker Auditorium, Mount Holyoke College. Free and open to the public. Wheelchair and public transit accessible. Call with interpreter or other access needs. For more info, call Freedom Center 413-582-9948 or Mount Holyoke College Department of Psychology and Education 413-538-2338 www.freedom-center.org.